I didn't spend much time in Mexico. I was there for 7 years. One thing I remember a lot is the houses that we lived in, and my dad not being there for a lot of the time. It seemed like every time one of us was born, my dad would migrate here, across the border and work here. As a child, I just didn't realize, that that's what those sacrifices were for, was for us to have, shelter and a decent place to live. We spent a lot of our childhood with my mom making tortillas and selling them by the pound to make ends meet. Or she also had chickens and just like really resourceful ways of, making money. Eventually, when I was 7 years old, my mom gave my father an ultimatum and said, we stay here and we starve together, or we risk it and we go to the US and live there for 5 years and save money, work a lot, and come back, right? But we need to be together. And so essentially that was what the moment where my parents made that courageous decision and that sacrifice to uproot and leave the country where they speak the language and the country that that their family lives in, to make sure that we would all be together, to make sure that we had better opportunities. We stayed in Arizona for, I think, maybe 2 weeks in someone's home for a while, and then in a motel, and then we got picked up from there and brought to Atlanta, which is where my mom's sister was living, and she received us and took care of us. And so I remember seeing Buford Highway, like the sign, over and over again, because we were driving up and down because we couldn't find our house. I remember seeing my little cousins hiding behind the couches, and so it was a very warm welcome after, a 3-4 week journey maybe. School was definitely a challenge. I just was so jealous of kids who could read and would watch them and just get angry because I couldn't communicate. And I was a great student in Mexico, and I knew the content, but I knew it in my language. And so being here, that first year, those first 2 years, I just felt so ignorant. That jealousy that I had of my classmates who could read in English, I guess that's what kind of pushed me to learn. And I came here when it's in the middle of 3rd grade, and so when I got to 5th grade, by that time I was in an advanced reading class and was the best student in the class at the end of the year. And so I learned really quickly. When I was a sophomore, in my literature class, we were reading Night by Elie Wiesel, and about the Holocaust and his story. So I just felt really connected to that story, and I decided to enter an art contest because I've always been an artist. And so I won 3rd place. My artwork was going to be on display at a ceremony, and I was invited to attend with my teacher and my mom, and I was gonna receive $50. And I just remember sitting down and waiting with my mom and my teacher, who was my mentor as well, coming back and telling me that I couldn't get my prize because I didn't have a social security number. I realized that it didn't matter how much work I put into something or how talented I was. Even though someone decided that I deserved it because I didn't have a set of numbers, because I wasn't born here, that would determine a lot of things in my life. Then I found that as someone who's undocumented, I don't qualify for federal financial aid. A lot of scholarships are not available to me. I can't apply for FAFSA. And so as I got older and approached my senior year, I realized that doors were just closing on me, and I heard no all the time. I joined Teach for America because my life had been so focused on advocating for undocumented people and undocumented students. I think I realized that the fight for social justice really needs to be fought together and across identities. And so I wanted to expand that fight into the classroom and to help all of my students. My teaching, I think, is my service to my community and to this country. And I think that in one way or another, I will always be an educator and will always be in the arts, right? And will always be creating. And so I'm doing everything I can to make sure that my actions are actions of permanency and to paint murals that will be here forever, even if I'm not, and to touch the lives of my students and plant seeds that will always be there, even if I'm not. Because this is my community, this is where I grew up, and this is home. And so this is where my students are, this is where I work. Regardless of what happens to me physically, whether I'm in the country or not, there's no way that, that I'm leaving.